Tim Gasper. Hey, everyone.
And we're going to be talking about the data products ABCs. Before we start out, kind of a quick intro about ourselves.
Yeah, sure. So I'm the VP of Product over at data.world. I've been in the data space doing product management for over 15 years at various different places, both from the services side as well as from the product side.
And my name is Juan Sequeda. I'm the principal scientist at data.world. I joined data.world a couple years ago when I sold my previous company, data.world. I have a balance between academia and industry. I've been in the space around 15 years. My PhD was in computer science around knowledge graphs, semantic technologies, and author of a book, Designing and Building Enterprise Knowledge Graphs. If you're interested in knowledge graphs, come to our booth on 836. I got books for people to go, so I just want to talk about that. Now, the really cool thing about today is that Tim and I are both the hosts of this podcast, Catalog and Cocktails. We do it live every Wednesday at 4 p.m. for the last 2+ years. Today is our 100th episode, and this is the first time that we're giving a talk together, so we're really excited about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If you want to listen to it, it's actually going to be at 10 o'clock tonight because we always do it at 4 o'clock Central Time, U.S. Central Time. So that's going to be tonight with the VP of Product of Fivetran. So please check that out with us.
And I wanted to bring this up because for the last 2.5 years and over 100 episodes, Tim and I have had the pleasure and honor to be able to speak to so many data leaders. And what we're presenting today at the Data Products ABCs is kind of our point of view and what we formed after talking to hundreds of data leaders and listeners and stuff. I know there's a couple of former guests in here. I think Steve Perry's here. There's a couple of people around here. Cindy Housens from Octagani. Omar is around here too. So we've had a lot of guests here. So please, so this is kind of the background. So, a little bit about data.world?
Yeah, so just briefly, data.world is a data catalog and governance company. We are the enterprise data catalog for the modern data stack, powered by a knowledge graph. And we are relentlessly focused on adoption. We have over 1 million users, almost 2 million users using our catalog overall. We deploy 1,000 releases a year. We are a leader for the Forrester Wave around enterprise data catalogs for data ops, and we are a very proud certified B Corporation, which means we have a mission to democratize data, and it's embedded in our core operating principles as a company. And we're also very proud to be a triple Snowflake partner, Snowflake Ready Technology Partner Premier, as well as powered by Snowflake. So definitely very excited about that, and we have wonderful customers that we love to partner with.
All right, so let's get into this whole discussion. So we've talked about data mesh. If you don't know what data mesh is, you've been living under a rock, and I don't think we need to go discuss about this. But out of the 4 principles, the one that personally I find very interesting is the data as a product, because it's bringing this product mindset, the product thinking into data. And then, I mean, Tim as a VP of product themselves, like, oh, I get to do my day job with data.
I know. This is my most exciting pillar because as a product manager and as somebody who's been in the data space for a very long time, I'm like, yes, my 2 favorite passions of data and product are coming together. We're going to take over the world. So
now, the honest, no BS stuff is, what the heck is a data product? Right? And everybody can go off and start making their definitions, and if you make the definition so broad, then everything's a data product and it defeats the purpose of what this is supposed to be. So what we're trying to come up with some sort of kind of a framework of principles around what a data product can look like, and what we're going to present to you is our point of view, which has been gathered from a lot of different points of views, and I think this is a community kind of discussion that needs to occur. You may agree, great. You may disagree, even better. Let's have that discussion. So we're going to go through this, and what I really want from everybody is to say, what do you agree with? What do you disagree with? What do you think needs to be changed, updated? What's missing? So the takeaway here, in case you need to leave in the next 2 minutes, what I want you to take away is that consuming data, the data that is there to go solve critical business questions, should be as simple and enjoyable as just buying your favorite product on your favorite e-commerce platform, right? So if you go, I always do the water bottles. I always have my really cool Yeti water bottle. I like water bottles. It's a very cool water bottle. And I search for water bottles. I have an intention. There's something I want to go do. And then I search, I get a bunch of facets, all different types of taxonomies, how I can traverse this. I get a bunch of different results. It's all ranked there's prices around these things, right? There's reviews, and if I click on something, I get more details. Like, that's the experience that we should be thinking about when it comes to data. So how do we do this? Let's go follow what we call our data products ABCs.
Yeah, and as we were actually looking at everything that we've learned from our conversations on the podcast, our collaboration with our partners, we started to list out what the things were that really made a data product, and also made it successful. We started to realize that quite a few of the ABCs started to get ticked off, and we're like, hey, let's just embrace this, right? And so A is accountability, B is boundaries, C is contracts and expectations, D is for downstream consumers, and E is for explicit knowledge. And if you are grabbing a quick an image of that code there, if you want to get more details than what we talk about today, that links out to data.world in our resources section. We have a great data product ABCs worksheet there.
So let's go through all of these. And what we're actually going to be presenting here are a bunch of questions. We're not giving you the answer to the solution. We're giving you questions that you need to be asking yourselves. So accountability. Who is the owner of this data? And I will acknowledge that sometimes the use of the word owner can be a little bit controversial because, hey, owner means that this is me, right? So other people have said it shouldn't be an owner. It should be the trustee or the ambassador of the data. But who takes that responsibility around that? Who defines the requirements? Who's actually talking to those consumers to figure out what is this thing? Who fixes it when it breaks? Who's on call? I mean, if you do have software, somebody has an on-call schedule, right? And they have a pager or whatever they used to have it. Who gets trouble if the data is mishandled? Who gets actually promoted if something amazing is happening with the data?
Yeah, not just bad stuff happens with data. Sometimes good stuff happens too. And one other thing to think about with accountability is, I know many of you probably have some governance programs. You've got spreadsheets or you got catalogs and things like that. Maybe you're looking for a new catalog. A lot of times it's easy to go overboard with people, right? You can have like 10 different roles associated with a particular asset. I think an important consideration is what is the least number of roles that you can have that can make you successful so that accountability is very clear.
So accountability, ask these questions. B is for boundaries. What is this thing? What isn't it? Literally, draw a box and say, is it inside this box or is it outside of this box? And also, let's acknowledge that the box is not static, right? It's going to evolve. So what is the possible even roadmap of what this product is going to look like? How is that going to evolve? By the way, where is this going to live? Is this going to be a table in a cloud data warehouse? Is it going to be an API? Is it going to be a GraphQL? Is it going to be an S3 bucket, blah, 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 right? What are the inputs and what are the outputs of this, right? Again, a lot of these stuff, we do this already kind of for software and stuff, thinking about for data.
Yep, and I think one thing to consider about why boundaries is important is because a bad habit can be to say, oh, well, we've got a bunch of data in our data lake or in our data warehouse, and so we've got lots of data products. It's like, well, if you can't articulate what it is and what it isn't, and where one part of the data kind of begins and ends, then you don't really have data products. You just have a bunch of data that you know people like to use. So consider what is that box and what are the inputs and outputs of that box, right? What is using it, what isn't going to use it, et cetera.
If you think about it, I have my water bottle, right? I put water in and I drink a bit, but hey, this is really strong. I could use it to go smash something if I needed to, but that's not what it's made for, right? Those are the boundaries of these things when you think about it. All right, C is for contracts and expectations. All right, what are the constraints around this data? How are we testing this data? What are the SLAs, the service level agreements, SLOs around this stuff? Here is this data product. How can it be used? How should it be used? How can it not be used, right? What are the policies of usage around this data? What is the expected performance of this, right? Is this expected to be used for analytics? So maybe queries over this can take a little bit longer if it's going to be more real time where you expect it needs to be immediate, right? How is this? What are the plans for scalability around this? We all talk about we want quality data, the high quality data. What the heck does high quality data mean? Well, let's go define it here. And we say, this is the expectation of what quality is, right? By the way, this isn't just anybody making these things up. Like, you have to understand that these are the quality and maintainability requirements because there's a consumer who's asking for these things, right?
Yep, and I think one thing that we thought was really important as we've had all these conversations is separating contracts from boundaries. Because just because you know a box exists doesn't mean you know exactly what you can depend on or not depend on with that box. Am I allowed to sit on the box? Does the box support 200 pounds, right? That's the kind of question that we answer with contracts and expectations. And depending on what it is that people are trying to do, which is kind of the next thing, that may affect whether or not your contracts are good enough or not.
And then, again, we can start making a list of what these things could be. And we don't want to go boil the ocean. So how do we know where to start? We got to talk to users, right? I think for me personally, the fascinating and what's shaking the world with data mesh is the social technical paradigm shift. And as Shamak was saying earlier today, and everybody in the panel, it's not really about technology. It is about the people and the process. And we speak a lot on our podcast and everything, that we live in this data-first world, which is like, give me more data, but we really need to go and shift to this knowledge-first world where people, context, and relationships come first. People first. Mm-hmm. So who are the current consumers of this? Who is asking for this data who's going to turn into a product? What are the requirements? Like, let's actually start talking to them. But because these boundaries may expand, right? As a data product owner, data product manager, you want to be thinking also, hey, what are the potential users going to be for this, right? Do we even know who they could be, or are we going to go start kind of exploring more within the organization? What are the use cases that they're considering? And I think something really interesting to consider is, what are the known use cases of today, and what are the unknown use cases of tomorrow? And how are we being prepared to go do that? And I always talk about this balance between efficiency and resilience. If we think about being efficient, I'm like, yes, I can get that done today. I can get that done. We solved that problem today. We solved that problem today. We're going good. But then you think about it, it's kind of like, it's almost a one-to-one relationship of the amount of work with the amount of questions that are being answered. How can I make sure that I'm being resilient such that I can do a least amount of work that can be able to go satisfy more types of questions? So it can be a one-to-many relationship. Mm-hmm. So let's be very clear about what is the value around this, right? What is the roadmap of the data products? How is this going to evolve? How is that value going to evolve? And actually, those consumers, how do they actually want to consume the data? Sometimes, hey, if I want this to be on a very nice dashboard because that's the first place it's going to go do. Okay, let's start with the dashboard. I know Cindy's not here, but she should be very, she doesn't like we use the words dashboard, but then how are these accesses of the data going to evolve over time?
Yeah, and two quick things to add. One is adoption is so important, and one of the reasons why we're so relentless about it is that if somebody's not using a data product, there's no downstream consumption, then like, should it exist as a product? You probably don't need that product, right? And then secondly, this is where data mesh, I think, becomes really interesting, because you think about, like, why can Amazon have so many millions of products within a single marketplace? It's because there's all these vendors that work within that marketplace. And so I think that's an example where data mesh becomes interesting, because when you start to hit that wall and you're like, man, I got 100 products and I can't manage more than that, well, maybe you really do need to think about how things like a data mesh approach can really help you scale.
And understanding your consumers, right, understands their context. So we think about, customer. Well, of course, everybody's going to have different definitions of the customer. Mm-hmm. All right, what are those definitions? Let's literally go start cataloging them. And hey, it's okay if there are different data products around customers, because we understand who are the consumers of that. As I go to Amazon, there's not just one water bottle you can go find and buy. There are hundreds, if not thousands of them. And who uses them? Well, depends on the types of consumers around that. But to be able to make that very explicit of what this stuff means comes the E, the explicit knowledge. Mm-hmm. What does this mean? And this is, as I mentioned before, we live in this data-first world, which is, hey, give me data, I need more data, I need more data. I said, pause, wait. So you're saying that you can't answer the question today because you lack data. So if you get more data, you're going to answer the question? I call BS on that. And I think this is where we need to start critical. This is the social technical change, because we need to start thinking about, what does this mean? So let's have these well-defined schemas. I mean, I think this is a trend that schemas have gone. I think schemas are coming back. We went through this NoSQL in ELT, and you do the transforms later, and now we're realizing, well, that transforms had a lot of meaning. And I'm realizing that people are doing all these transformations over and over again. That's the schemas around these things. We get into more semantics, talk about ontologies. Another thing is, how are these data products related? So if we have two data products about customers or users, right, let's make very explicit what that means versus another data product of what that users means. So if a consumer comes in, they can really understand what that is. Another thing is even just documentation. How am I going to go use this? Give me examples.
Yep, I think examples of the kinds of analysis that you can do with something, or something that somebody's done in the past, can be very, very helpful. In general, just like we become so obsessed with data, like what you're saying, right? Data, data, data. Consider how data and knowledge together really provide the context that you need around your data product.
So this is an example that we're just actually, we're figuring this out on our own. I'm not saying that this is the panacea here, the silver, no. This is an example. So let's go through these things. We're going to go create a user data product. So accountability.
We're defining some roles, right?
So, all right, we're going to say the product domain is going to be responsible for that, right? Because they're the ones who are creating the software, the tool that users are, well, using it. That's kind of where the data is actually started at the beginning. So they're going to take that ownership of what is the definition of a user. We define who we're calling here the technical steward, in case all the technical stuff goes wrong. The business steward around what does this stuff actually mean. And we actually have a manager who's going off and taking the requirements.
And as you can see, the specific names of the roles don't matter nearly as much as what are they responsible for, right? The requirements, the meaning, what's wrong with the data pipeline, right? The second thing here is boundaries, right? So we're saying that the user data product is going to contain data about users, and it's starting from January 1st, 2022. We're saying what's in the box. And users are defined as people who have activated their account. We're saying what data is in there. And this data product is going to live in our cloud data warehouse, right? And so we're saying where it's going to live. Then contracts define more specifically what it is that we can depend on. So this data product is going to have a list of all the users. It's going to contain all these fields, and you can depend on those fields being in this data product. It's not like all of a sudden one day those fields are going to disappear, and if they did, then that's a problem. Now by defining contracts, quality actually starts to become more clear because we know when we're breaking those contracts. And then things like the data product's going to be near real time, and it might have up to an hour of lag. So if it has less than an hour of lag, we're okay. If it has more, then we've got a problem, right? So these are all contracts and expectations.
Right. So in this case, we're saying, hey, who's asking for this data? We're starting off with the customer success team, right? They're going to be the main consumer of the data. They're the ones who are requesting this type of information. But we also realize, right, say Charlene here, who's the data product manager, says, oh, I know marketing and sales are probably going to go use that. I've been talking to them. I'm going to start getting the requirements. We're first going to go focus on the customer success team, and then we're going to go start expanding to other ones over there. Because they want to know, hey, how can I use this to go upsell and cross-sell and so forth, right? And depending on those requirements, well, we'll be able to understand what other needs, what other attributes need to be captured if they're there, or otherwise we can go tell the product team saying, hey, we need to start capturing these other things that we don't do right now. And then finally, the explicit semantics is literally show me what is the schema around these things, right? How are we defining what is a phone number or an email? Or, I mean, we can get very specific around this stuff. That's what it actually means. And into the semantics, we say, hey, a user can only have one email, for example, right? Things like that, we can get into those level of details.
Right.
And then we start saying, hey, there's another data product called activities. You can take the user data product, and you can then take the activity data product, and you can do things together. So then if you're starting to think about, I need to go find out who are my real active users, well, don't spend your time creating data for that metric. You're going to use that metric by answering using the data about users and the data about activities. Because if I separate it that way, what happens? I can now start asking a bunch of questions about users. I can ask a bunch of questions about activities, and not just that real active users. What is my most popular feature, for example, things you can be doing, right?
Yep. So one of the ways that we think about how you actually develop these data products is by what we call an agile data governance approach. Because in general, you can really boil the ocean when it comes to trying to do data product management, and we think that you really got to have a simpler loop that allows you to iterate on this very quickly. And so in general, we think it all starts with the question, right? What are the questions and the problems that we're trying to solve in our organization? Because those are the things you should be building products for. It should never be starting with just looking at the data and saying, oh, we got data, right? What should we do with that data? No, it should start with the business questions. And then from there, you have to think about what data do we need to solve solve that business question? Who are the people that are going to use this? How do we put them in the best position to actually leverage that data and that data product? And then there's going to be this interplay between the experts and the people who are accountable for that product and the people that need to actually use and interact with that product. So the people who need to use it need to understand and trust it. They need to be able to do their analysis. They need to ultimately answer the question. And usually what happens, everybody knows this here, right? When you get access to data, you start using data, more often than not, you have more questions, new opportunities. So that's why it all loops back. And this is the process we really recommend in general based on what we've seen as best practices to make this process iterative and easy.
So I have a question for the audience. In your organization, do you already have a data catalog? Just raise your hand. Okay. So what I want you to go think about is that every single box in here, this is people and process, but there needs to be some relationship how the technology is going to be an enabler for that. So ask yourself, how can you take your existing catalog, whatever you have, and can they actually support this? So here's something I'm talking to a lot of our customers and questioning out there is, we need to start cataloging those questions. Inside of your data catalog, we need to be able to say, let's go catalog the questions people are having. And let's go have those discussions, see what people are having. Let's actually start cataloging the people and their teams inside our data catalog to know, hey, these questions are associated to these teams and these people. And then you can do an analysis and saying, hey, it's super interesting that these very similar questions that are being asked by completely different departments, like, did we even know that's happening? So I think we really need to start evolving and thinking about a data catalog being more what I'm calling a data knowledge catalog. And every single piece here needs to be, it's a people and process, but needs to be enabled and supported by technology. So please take that kind of in mind about how is your catalog and your technology supporting the people and process change here.
And then the last thing that we want to kind of show you here before wrapping up is that typically when you're building out data products or you're taking a more of a traditional governance kind of approach, it's more of a waterfall approach. And I think many of us know through software best practices that the waterfall approach often is not the most effective to be able to be dynamic, to change into needs, and to iterate and improve. And so that's why we really recommend you should be thinking about how you go through that loop that we just showed on that previous slide fast, and how you can quickly develop data product 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. And I don't have it listed on this slide, but I'll say it out loud. Think about life cycle. You heard me mention on the Downstream Consumers slide that, well, what if people aren't using it or it's not really providing the value? Kill it. Get rid of that data product. It's not worthwhile. Think about surface area. Surface area as a data organization can hurt, and that's energy that we could be spending on things that are more valuable. So iterate, 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 and think about life cycle.
And on that topic about usage, right, I think let's talk about here for a second, what are the metrics? So this is something extremely, extremely important that I think a lot of organizations miss. You right now need to think about what is your current baseline. Because if you don't know what your baseline is, you don't know where you're going to go, right? You can't measure, you can't really figure out, am I being successful or not? These are questions that you should be asking yourself today, and it doesn't matter how bad the answers are or whatever, but you need to understand where you are. So figure out, right, do surveys internally within your organization. How many of your employees are actually searching for data on a regular basis? And how are they doing that today, right? How many of your employees are actually doing self-service with the data, or they're actually dependent on somebody else, right? How many apps are being used that consumes this data to actually change and improve the behavior of the company to make more money and save more money, right? What are the adoption rates, right? For the folks who raise your hand, you have a catalog. How many people are on that catalog? What is your plan for adoption? Is it increasing? Like, are you measuring who's going on, searching for what, and what are they doing with that, and what is the result of that, how much money that's being made or being saved? Do you know that? You need to know that stuff. What are the most common types of data that employees are actually using to deliver that business impact, right? What Tim just said, like, are we spending all this time and energy doing things and we realize everybody's using that data over here, nobody's using that. Why are we spending time doing all that stuff? Or another thing that people come up a lot when it comes to the whole data mesh and the centralization, decentralization, they say, oh, but then data's gonna be duplicated. Like, yeah, I remember there's 1,000 water bottles on Amazon. So what? Let's just let people go consume the data they need, and if there's friction, guess what? That sign of energy, let's go focus, understand, let's go talk to those people to figure out what do they need and see if there's something we can make better. And if we realize that nobody's complaining about this stuff here, either two things are happening. It's work, let it be, or nobody is using it. I'm glad I'm not spending time on that. Maybe I should probably kill it. Do you have a data community? How many people are active in this? So these are the things that you should be measuring when you understand that baseline today. You start building your data products to go seeing that.
Yep. I think one last thing also to mention is we talked about killing products and things like that. A really interesting concept is actually, I don't know if Emily Pick is here from data.world in the crowd here, but she's our senior marketing manager, and she's been really talking a lot lately about this idea of data marketing. And we think that's a fascinating concept because a lot of data, maybe it is actually useful and it's just not being marketed properly. So consider that lens too, right? That's another angle to think about this that's very important and it affects your metrics a lot, right? If you never did any marketing, how are you going to get people to buy your product?
And I mean, going back to the data product owner, whatever, another way of seeing it is ambassador. Laura Mattson has a great book called Disrupting Data Governance. And she says, she starts the book saying, I hate data governance, right? And then she advocates for this tool, the ambassador, where your goal in doing data governance is the majority of that time is to promote the usage of data. So why did I buy this water bottle from Yeti? They have great marketing, I understood it, and I'm like, oh, I decided to go buy that because they had the marketing around that. Think about it. You should be marketing your data. You should be proud of your data. You want people to go use your data. You want your data to be celebrated. I mean, we talked, that was in the panel earlier today on data mesh. It's like, there's that heart and let's have fun with that. We need to bring in that mentality. Again, this is more people and process. This is a social technical view. So, on our
podcast, we always end with takeaways.
So
these
Tim
are
takes
three.
away with takeaways, the TTT.
So consuming data to solve crucial business problems should be as easy as buying a product on your favorite e-commerce platform. So think about that Amazon image and all the flexibility that you get with that Amazon experience. ABCDE,
accountability, boundaries, contracts and expectations, downstream consumers, and your explicit knowledge. Think about this when you're thinking about your data product. Do I have these ABCDE?
Yep, and then leverage the best practices of agile software development to quickly manage and iterate your data products. Think about life cycle. Think with an investor mentality. Do I need to market this more? Do I need to kill it, right? And if you're interested to talk more and learn more, please visit data.world over at 836.
We're on the other side over there.
Kind of down that way.
And I would love to go talk about, please, remember when I started out, what do you agree with? What do you disagree with? What should we do less? What should we do more? Please come talk to us and listen to our podcast. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.